Hello everyone, welcome to the lecture series of environmental studies. Our course code is 22447. In this lecture we are going to see our unit third, that is ecosystem and biodiversity. To satisfy our unit, we are going to see our CO3, that is course outcome 3 is conserve ecosystem and biodiversity, and our unit outcome 3C is list of levels of biodiversity. What we will learn today? Learning objective or key learnings for today's lectures are list of levels of biodiversity. In this, we are going to see two agenda points. First is definition of biodiversity and second one is levels of biodiversity. Content of today's lectures are definition of biodiversity, levels of biodiversity. There are three levels of biodiversity. That is, first one is genetic biodiversity, second one is species biodiversity, and third one is ecosystem biodiversity. So this is the concept map of today's lecture, levels of biodiversity. In that we can see there are three levels of biodiversity. First one is genetic biodiversity, second one is species biodiversity, third one is ecosystem biodiversity. In previous lecture we saw that different types of ecosystem, different techniques to conserve the ecosystems, biotic components. So in this lecture we are going to see the definition of biodiversity. Biodiversity means what? If we split word into two forms, the bio means life and diversity means variety. So let's see the definition of biodiversity. Biodiversity is the variety of life, the different plants, animals, and microorganisms, their genes, and ecosystem of which they are part. This is nothing but the biodiversity. There is another definition of the biodiversity. Biological diversity or biodiversity is the part of nature which includes differences in genes among the individuals of a species, the variety and richness of all the plants and animal species at a different scale in space, locality in a region, in the country and the world, and various types of ecosystems, both terrestrial and aquatic within a defined area. This is nothing but the biodiversity. This definition describes most circumstances and present a unified view of traditional three types in which biological variety can be identified. The first one is genetic biodiversity. Second one is species biodiversity, and third one is ecosystem biodiversity. So let's see one by one. What is the meaning of genetic, specific species, and ecosystem biodiversity? So genetic biodiversity. For genetics, biodiversity is the diversity of genes and organisms. The frequency and the variety of genes inside and between the populations of the same species, varieties of plants and animals are defined as genetic biodiversity. The genetic variation is a fundamental quality of the biological entities, that is, the population of crop plants and domesticated animals, their wild parents and wild populations. It includes the genetic variation within the species, both among geographically separated populations and among individuals with the single population. For example, variety of rice, teak wood, dog, etc. Each member of any animal or plant species differ widely from other individuals and its genetic makeup because of the large number of combinations possible in genes that give every individual specific characteristics. Thus, for example, each human being is very different from all others. This genetic variability is essential for a healthy breeding population of a species. What happened in genetic biodiversity, which contains different types of species, different types of animals, plants, birds, insects, etc. Each member of the animal or plant species having different genetic properties because of their different genetic properties because of their parents, and this shows, and this is very essential for healthy breeding population for their species. Next one is second level of biodiversity is species biodiversity. Species biodiversity indicates the number of species found in a particular ecosystem. It also accounts for the number within the species. The species biodiversity means animal and plants of big size. There are millions of tiny primary of the insects which constitute 73%, microbes such as viruses, bacteria, algae, protozoa constitute 6%, mushroom constitute 4%. It includes full range of species from microorganisms to giants and mammoth varieties of plants and animals, for example, single-celled virus and bacteria, etc., and multicellular plants, animals, and fungi. Plant species, for example, apple, mango, grapes, etc. Animal species, for example, lion, tiger, elephant, etc. Natural undisturbed tropical forests have a such great species richness and plantation developed by forest department for timber. At present, conservation scientists have been able to identify and categorize about 1.8 million species on Earth. Now we are going to see the another ecosystem, that is ecosystem biodiversity. In ecosystem biodiversity is the diversity of the durable interaction between species and their environment. In each ecosystem, organisms interact with each other and also with the air, water, and soil surrounding them. That is a biotic factor. In previous lecture, we saw that the environment is nothing but the combination of biotic and abiotic factors. That is, all living things and non-living things mixed together a environment, and it's nothing but the specific type of ecosystem. In ecosystem diversity, this interaction include the recycling of the nutrition components, formation of ground, and filtration of water. These terms were first used by wildlife scientist and conservation Raymond Dasman. Nowadays, concept of biodiversity has achieved widespread popularity among biologists, environmentalists, political leaders, and concerned citizens worldwide. It provides variation in biological communities in which species exist and interact. For example, river ecosystem, forest ecosystem, desert ecosystem. There are a large variety of different ecosystems on Earth which have their own complement of distinctive interlinked species based on differences in the habitat. India is exponentially rich in its ecosystem biodiversity. In previous lecture, we see that the ecosystem it totally depends on the weather conditions of the environment. For example, their temperature, their quality of the soil, their monsoon levels, their heat, atmospheric conditions, that is the heights. All the factors depends on the growth and development of the ecosystem. So there are we see the different ecosystems are there because of all weather conditions, different weather conditions. For example, deserts where there is no rain and high heat, because of that, the different ecosystem is formed there. In the grassland, there is a different ecosystem. In bushland, there is a different ecosystem to drop because of the very low temperature. The ecosystem is totally different from the desert and bushland. Tropical rainforest, because of perpendicular sun rays, the tropical rainforest have different ecosystems. The plants is very tall as compared to the all other ecosystems and coniferous forest. These are another kind of the ecosystem. And in that ecosystem, we find the different diversity, biodiversities. The animals living in the desert, the tundra, the bushland are totally showing different characteristics. That's why they are live there. This is nothing but the ecosystem, and this is the that was the third level of the biodiversity. Next, our topic is levels of biodiversity. A variety of object measures have been developed in order to measure biodiversity empirically. Each measure of biodiversity relates to a particular use of the data. Most commonly used indicators for measuring biodiversity are: first one is alpha biodiversity, second one is beta biodiversity, and third one is gamma biodiversity. So let's first one is alpha biodiversity. Diversity within a particular area, community, or ecosystem measured by continuing counting the number of taxa within the ecosystem is nothing but the alpha biodiversity. Alpha biodiversity is refers to a group of organisms interacting and competing for the same resources or sharing the same environment. For example, in ecosystem X alpha, variety of species in one ecosystem, and that alpha is equal to 4. What's happened in the alpha diversity? Suppose we are seeing here is shown a desert, which is nothing but one kind of the ecosystem. In that ecosystem, there are number of organisms which shares the same environment. Okay, suppose this is one kind of environment, and A is a species. Okay, suppose we consider that the A is a species which depends on totally that the environment which shares the same environment with other species is nothing but the alpha diversity. Now let's see the beta diversity. Diversity of species among various ecosystems, involves comparing the number of taxa that are unique to each of the ecosystem. It refers to the expression of diversity between habitats. For example, in ecosystem X and Y, B only uncommon species variety in two adjustable ecosystems. What's happened in this ecosystem? Suppose we consider there are two ecosystems that is shown in red color and yellow color. What's happened in the ecosystem? D is common to the both ecosystem which can live in either in yellow ecosystem or red ecosystem. But B is the same species which can live in unique ecosystem, which cannot be go to the combined ecosystem or red ecosystem which only lives in B ecosystem. That's nothing but the beta diversity. Now we are going to see the next level of the biodiversity, that is gamma diversity. It refers to the landscape diversity or diversity of habitats within a landscape or region. For example, in ecosystem XYZ, gamma, all uncommon species and common species that are considered only once, that is gamma is equal to 30. It is a measure of all overall diversity of different ecosystems within a region. Biodiversity is usually plotted a taxonomic richness of the geographical area with the same reference of a temporal scale. Whittaker described following three types of matrices to measure species diversity, that is species richness, Simpson's index, Shannon-Winner index. Recently, another new index is added, that is a mean species abundance index, that is MSE, is used to measure species diversity. This index calculates the trends in population size, of a cross section of the species. What's happened in the gamma diversity? Suppose there are three different ecosystems. The gamma diversity members are can possibly live in all three zones, that is B, D, H, in all three zones. So that's nothing but gamma diversity. What's happened in the alpha diversity? These members only shares some part with others is called as alpha biodiversity. What's happened in the beta biodiversity, which cannot share its part, which can live in its specific region, is nothing but the beta biodiversity. And gamma diversity means the species lives in all three kinds of combined biodiversity, is nothing but the gamma diversity. So those are the contents of today's lecture. Now we are going to see in next lecture, that is the value of biodiversity and other ecological services. So let's take a revision what we studied: definition of biodiversity, levels of biodiversities, that is genetic, species and ecosystem biodiversity, and alpha, beta and gamma biodiversity. So let's take a small revision. Definition of a biodiversity. In simple language, biodiversity is a variety of life. Okay, where the different ecosystems comes under the biodiversity, that is we saw desert, grassland, bushland, tundra, tropical rainforest, coniferous forest. Why these ecosystems are formed? We already explained that because of its weather conditions and atmospheric conditions, the different ecosystems are formed, and that ecosystem is nothing but the biodiversity. Okay. Next, we see the different levels of biodiversity. In that, we see the genetic biodiversity. In genetic biodiversity, there are different forms of the animals, birds, and they have different types of genes. By mutation, they shows the different types of individual characteristics, and this is very essential to healthy breeding. This is nothing but the genetic biodiversity. Species biodiversity means what? There are different kinds of species found in the deserts, in the forest. For we are taking example, suppose Bengal tiger. It's a different kind of species. Lions. These are different types of species. Dogs. They are different types of species. Okay, and these species are get mutated after each breed and having different characteristics which are very required for their next generation. Last one is ecosystem biodiversity. Each ecosystem is a biodiversity, showing a lot different biodiversity. In ecosystem, there are desert, grasslands, tundras. Okay, there are number of diversities are available in the ecosystem, and we see the alpha, beta, and gamma diversity. In alpha diversity, the ecosystem, the member of the ecosystem only shares some part with others. In beta, which is separated, which cannot be shared with the other ecosystem. And in gamma, this shares the animals and birds, the species living in the ecosystem, which shares all the biodiversities. Okay, that's we studied in today's lecture. So here we will stop. In next lecture, we are going to see value of biodiversity and other ecological services. So thank you.